Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we try to cut through all the noise and get straight to what matters. Today, we're diving into that familiar buzz, the big claims that always come with a new iPhone launch. You know the one, best smartphone ever. We are, of course, talking about the brand new Apple iPhone 16 Pro Max.
That's right. And our job here really is to slice through that marketing hype for you, our listener, and figure out what this thing actually delivers. We've dug into a whole bunch of sources for this one. Technical reviews, think DxOMark, hands-on user stuff from Thorough.com, Tom's Guide, plus, those candid discussions you find on Apple support communities, Reddit, and even some pro tips from a YouTube photographer, Evan Raft.
Yeah, so we're aiming to pull out the really important bits, the insights. What are the real upgrades? Any surprises? What are people getting frustrated about? And ultimately, does it live up to that Pro Max name? And maybe more importantly, how do you actually get the most out of it, especially that camera system? Okay, let's get into it.
Sounds good. So we'll start with the core hardware, performance, that big display, which has its own challenges, apparently. Then we'll really dissect the camera system everyone talks about. Right. Battery life, of course.
Yeah.
And the whole iOS 18 experience day to day.
Okay, let's start with just picking it up, that first impression. What are reviewers saying about the physical feel, the design? Anything really stand out?
Well, the new desert titanium color seems to be a hit. People are describing it as a pleasant bronze tone. On the sides, camera bits. And the back's almost white. The side rails, the titanium, they're glossier now. And reportedly feel, nicer to hold than the last model. Design-wise, it's not a huge leap from the 15 Pro Max. Dimensions are 163 by 77.6 by 8.25 millimeters, weighs 227 grams, still got that IP68 water and dust resistance. But the big question really is that size, 6.9 inches? Is it just too big to handle comfortably with one hand, like some people say?
Yeah.
Or does Apple's reachability thing actually make it work?
Yeah, that's always the trade-off with these Max phones. Okay, so from the feel, let's talk about the screen itself. Apple calls it Super Retina XDR. Fancy name. How does this 6.9-inch OLED panel, 2868 by 320 pixels, 460 ppi, how does it actually look and perform in the real world?
Right. So DxOMark puts it 25th globally and 19th in the ultra-premium bracket. They do praise its color accuracy, which is excellent, and video looks fantastic on it, SDR and HDR. And yeah, that resolution, 460 pixels per inch, means text, images, everything looks incredibly sharp, really crisp. Brightness is impressive, too. Reviewers measured like 1,553 nits for HDR, peaks around 2,000 nits outdoors.
I sense a butt coming.
Well, yeah. Some reviewers actually measured slightly lower brightness and color accuracy compared to the 15 Pro, which is interesting. And it doesn't quite hit the peak brightness of some competitors, like the Pixel 9 Pro XL gets way brighter for 2,300 nits. But what's really fascinating is that even people who aren't, techie, they're reportedly really impressed by how vivid it looks. Suggests the real-world experience maybe goes beyond just the numbers for a lot of folks. Oh, and the refresh rate now goes down to 1 Hz. Minimum brightness is 1 nit for dark rooms. Though some still find that always-on display a bit too bright in the pitch black.
Okay, under the hood then. The A18 Pro chip, Apple's claiming big things. What are the benchmarks saying? And does it actually feel faster day to day?
So the A18 Pro, it's got a 6-core CPU, 6-core GPU, and that 16-core neural engine. And that neural engine, that's Apple's dedicated bit for speeding up AI tasks, right? Like Siri improvements, photo processing, stuff like that. Makes it way faster on the device itself. It's built on their, quote, second-generation 3-nanometer process, which basically means more power, better efficiency in theory. Tiny transistors packed tight. Benchmarks. The CPU performance is dominant, like 47% faster single-core, 15% faster multi-core than the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Big numbers.
Wow, okay.
But graphics, it actually falls behind a bit there. Ray tracing is about 15% lower than the S24 Ultra.
So for serious gamers pushing graphics?
They might notice a slight difference maybe, compared to the top Android competition in really demanding scenes. But where it really shines is real-world stuff, like video transcoding. Taking a 4K clip down to 1080p in Adobe Premiere Rush, did it in 21 seconds. That's half the time the S24 Ultra took.
Performance is great, but the heat question always comes up with iPhones. Has that been an issue in the past? Are they managing it better now with all that power?
Initial reports suggest it does get less warm than the 15 Pro Max. So maybe those internal thermal tweaks helped. However, you do see reports popping up. Apple support communities, Reddit, people talking about overheating warnings, black screens, the phone getting really hot. Now, sometimes they say it's linked to intense apps or fast charging, or maybe just that initial setup period where the phone is indexing everything. So it raises that question, doesn't it? Is it a wider design issue or more just isolated cases, specific circumstances? Hard to say definitively yet.
Right, okay. So we've got serious power, but let's talk about what often drives the upgrade cycle, the camera. That's the horsepower many people really care about. What's the story with the 16 Pro Max camera system? Are we looking at major hardware changes, or is it more iterative stuff?
Okay, camera. The Pro models exclusively get that 5x optical telephoto lens and a new 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera. That ultra-wide is a big step up from the 12 MP on the non-Pro phones. The main camera, the 48 MP Fusion lens, it has readout speeds twice as fast, which enables pretty impressive 4K video at 120 frames per second in ProRes log format.
ProRes log, that's the flat profile for editors, right? More flexibility.
Exactly. Gives pros way more room to play with color and dynamic range in post-production. And DxOMark scores the camera system third overall and third in the ultra-premium class. They really praise the video quality class leading, they say. Detail, noise reduction, even in low light.
Sounds fantastic for video pros, but what about just taking normal photos? Is it a huge leap forward for everyday snaps?
Yeah, that's the thing. Reviewers are saying, look, the image quality is excellent, no doubt. But the actual improvements over the 15 Pro for just, regular photos, they're pretty minor. That 5x telephoto is still maybe the weakest link, especially when the light gets low, it can get noisy. They did improve flare resistance with new lens coatings, which is good, but you can still get some ghosting if you shoot right into a bright light.
So the takeaway seems to be great for pros pushing video and raw photos, but maybe overkill or even complicated for casual users.
I kind of hit the nail on the head. It feels like Apple's leaning hard into that prosumer angle, maybe at the risk of adding complexity that the average person doesn't need or want for their everyday pictures.
Speaking of complexity, Apple added some new controls. That camera control button, the updated photographic styles. How are those landing with users? Making things easier or...
Uh-oh. Yeah, the camera control button. It's below the power button. Acts as a shutter. Has capacitive controls for exposure, zoom, styles. Some people like it, find it gives, an additional level of control. Others, calling it a bust. Too sensitive, finicky, especially in portrait mode, apparently. Reports of it not always waking the camera or leaving the control dial stuck on screen.
Yikes. Not ideal. And the photographic styles.
Right, the latest generation ones.
Yeah.
They're supposed to let you change or remove styles after shooting HEIC photos. Big deal, right?
Wow.
This is where reviewers seem really frustrated. Many are calling the setup process ridiculously complex, non-intuitive. One reviewer called the interface for picking styles the dumbest ever seen, which is quite a statement.
Wow. Sounds like maybe Apple needs a genius bar for their own software design sometimes.
Maybe. Apparently, it makes you scroll endlessly to reselect photos, offers choices like amber and rose gold instead of just clear, simple options. It really feels like a case where a powerful feature is just buried under a really frustrating user experience.
Okay, that sounds potentially maddening for someone who just wants a good photo easily. So if you are serious about photography with this phone, how do you actually make the most of it and cut through that frustration? Like, what's the simplest way for someone to start using this Pro camera without getting totally lost?
Good question. The absolute key for top quality is shooting in ProRAW Max. That gets you up to 48 megapixels of data. That raw data gives you way more flexibility later when you're editing, adjusting white balance, exposure, pulling details out of shadows, tanning highlights, all that stuff. And getting those big files off the phone is easier now. The 16 Pro can airdrop the raw files, the .dna files, straight to your Mac or computer. Previous iPhones sometimes converted them to JPEG automatically, which you don't want. So when you import into Lightroom or whatever, make sure you're grabbing the .dne, not .heric.
Okay, good tip on file management. But once you have the raw file in your editor, what's the secret sauce? I've heard raw files can look kind of flat or dark initially.
You heard right. They often do. The crucial thing is the Apple ProRAW picture profile. You need to apply this in your editing software. This profile essentially applies Apple's computational smarts, how it balances highlights and shadows, the general look. Without it, the raw images can look extremely dark and not very good looking, as one source put it. So if you use editing presets, just double check they're compatible with, or at least don't overwrite that Apple ProRAW profile. And finally, when you export, highest quality, 100% quality setting, 300 pixels per inch. Keep all that detail you captured.
Makes sense. Let's shift gears slightly. AI, it's everywhere, but Apple seems to be playing it differently with the 16 Pro Max compared to, say, Google or Samsung. What's their angle?
Yeah, Apple Intelligence, it's built in, and they're really framing it as personal intelligence, focused on writing help, organizing, productivity things, and privacy is a huge emphasis. So initial features are things like summaries in Mail and Safari, tools to help you rewrite text, maybe a slightly smarter Siri. They do have generative object removal in Photos, like Google's Magic Eraser. But even there, Apple's approach is described as far more conservative. Yeah. They want to, quote, maintain the integrity of the photograph. So less about wild transformations, more about subtle edits.
So fewer flashy AI tricks, maybe more focus on privacy and integration.
Exactly. That seems to be the trade-off. You might not get the immediate wow generative features you see elsewhere, but the idea is it's more private and woven into the core apps seamlessly. Some users like the writing tools, the AI emojis, but there's definitely some disappointment that the really advanced Siri features, the full AI upgrade, won't land until spring 2025.
Okay, stepping back from the cutting-edge stuff.
Yeah.
What about just using the phone day to day? iOS 18 on the 16 Pro Max. How's that core software experience generally positive?
iOS 18 is actually seen as a surprisingly full-featured upgrade, especially around personalization. Big steps there, like you can finally put app icons wherever you want on the home screen. Freedom.
Finally.
Right. And there's a new icon tinting feature that looks really nice, apparently. It matches your wallpaper, changes dynamically. Control Center is more customizable now, too. Yeah. And you can change the lock screen controls, even use third-party app shortcuts there.
Yeah.
Oh, and the Photos app got a big redesign. Reportedly gorgeous now.
Yeah.
And better organized.
Okay, lots of welcome changes. But glitches.
Yeah.
Frustrations. What's the reality check from users who've been living with it for a bit?
Unfortunately, yeah, there are some recurring complaints. Some users mention lackluster spam call and text protection. Seems like that's still not great. More seriously, you see quite a few reports on support forums about persistent bugs, apps freezing up, glitchy color lines when closing apps, typing lag, slow photo scrolling, the screen missing taps or swipes. Some users sound really frustrated, even comparing it to an aftermarket device, saying they regret upgrading from older iPhones.
Wow, that's quite a contrast to the smooth Apple experience we usually expect.
It really is. And what's fascinating is the split. Some people report zero issues, smooth sailing. Others are having significant problems. It suggests maybe it's not universal bugs, but perhaps some variability in the hardware, or maybe certain app combinations causing conflicts. It's unclear, but the contrast is stark.
All right, let's talk battery life, always a huge factor, especially with that big screen and powerful chip. How does the iPhone 16 Pro Max hold up?
Well, Tom's Guide had fantastic results. Their test, surfing the web continuously over 5G, lasted 18 hours and 6 minutes. They called it the best battery life of any iPhone Apple's ever released. Said it beats almost every other phone they've tested, except for a couple of specialized gaming phones. Apple's own claims are up to 33 hours of video playback, 105 hours of audio. Big numbers.
Okay, 18 hours sounds amazing, but again, I'm hearing whispers online, users telling a different story in real life. What's going on there? Why the huge gap?
That's the critical point, isn't it? Because you do see Reddit users, for instance, saying flat out the battery life is not that impressive. People saying their phone needs charging by 9:30 p.m., even with fairly light use. Some reporting it drains a full % every few minutes.
A percent every few minutes? That sounds awful.
It does. So why the difference? The most likely explanation seems to be, yes, in controlled lab tests, the hardware offers amazing endurance potential, industry-leading even. But real-world use involves intense apps running, background tasks, especially on a new phone doing setup stuff, maybe patchy network signal. All that can dramatically cut into that potential. Right. It reveals a gap, for some users at least, between that benchmark brilliance and day-to-day reliability.
Okay, so we land at the price. This is an ultra-premium phone. Starts at $1,199 for 256 gigs, and storage upgrades cost a lot. Putting it all together, the power, the display, the complex camera, the iOS quirks, the battery questions. What's the verdict on value? Is the Pro Max worth that serious chunk of change?
Yeah, the value proposition. It's largely seen as the, quote, obvious choice for Apple fans who want the absolute latest camera features and that biggest, best display. If you're upgrading from, say, an iPhone 14 series or something older, it probably feels like a really compelling upgrade. Lots of noticeable changes. However, many reviewers, and users too, point out it's mostly an incremental update from the 15 Pro Max. Some people are concluding they're simply not Pro enough to justify the expense of the Pro Max model. Maybe the standard Pro, or even a Plus model, offers better value for their actual needs.
And some regret buying it.
Yeah, we saw that on Reddit quite a bit. Users feeling the phone seems unfinished, or just too similar to their old one, considering the cost. Some were even talking about trading it back in for an older, cheaper model, which is pretty telling.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've taken a really deep dive into the iPhone 16 Pro Max. We found a device that's undeniably powerful, best-in-class CPU. That display is gorgeous, genuinely impressing even non-tech folks. And battery life, in controlled tests at least, is industry-leading. The camera system has serious hardware upgrades, especially for Pro Video, and huge potential with Pro RAW, if you know how to unlock it. And iOS 18 brings some really nice personalization.
But yeah, our deep dive also definitely highlighted the frustrations. That camera control button seems finicky for many. The photographic styles interface sounds bafflingly complex. And those mixed reports about software glitches, battery life inconsistencies, they can really take the shine off that premium price tag. Plus, Apple's careful, conservative approach to AI means some tools you see on rival phones just aren't fully there yet. That's a deliberate choice, prioritizing privacy maybe, but still a factor.
So, where does that leave us? What does it all mean for you, the listener? Is this iPhone 16 Pro Max really just for the hardcore Apple enthusiast? Someone who wants the absolute bleeding edge and is willing to learn its quirks, master its complexities? Or maybe, for the average user, does that Pro Max value only really make sense if you fully lean into and understand those professional features? Navigating the tricky bits Apple's introduced makes you wonder, what does Pro even mean on a smartphone anymore? And how much complexity becomes too much for the person just trying to use their phone every day? Something to think about.